In the early 2010s, Hyundai was trying to get away from its reputation of building cheap, boring cars and wanted to further appeal towards the youths. Now, this wasn't the first time the brand had tried to be cool, but their early efforts left a little to be desired. Even after continually improving their sporty coupe offering for nearly 20 years, they still weren't really taken seriously by anyone other than rental car providers. So this time, they wanted something different. Sure, it was based on an economy car, but look guys, it's asymmetrical!
Wow!
Little did people know that this little oddball would eventually rival hot hatch icons like the Volkswagen Golf GTI and Honda Civic Type R, launching a performance sub-brand that would finally give Hyundai some of the respect it had so desperately sought for 30 years. This is the story of the Hyundai Veloster. The story of the Veloster begins way back in the early 1990s, with the brand's first attempt at a quote-unquote sporty car. The Hyundai Scoop was essentially a more stylish two-door coupe version of the Hyundai Excel, which itself was based on the second-generation Mitsubishi Mirage. While the name is apparently a contraction of Sport Coupe, the base model's Mitsubishi-sourced 1.5-liter engines, 81 horsepower, and 91 pound-feet of torque wasn't exactly exhilarating. To give the Scoop some credit, however, its starting price in the US was just $8,495 in 1991, about $19,556 today, which was significantly less than its already affordable competitors. Additionally, it was well equipped for the money, and it had a pretty nice looking wraparound rear window. Around 1993, Hyundai facelifted the Scoop and equipped it with a new engine. It was still 1.5 liters, but the naturally aspirated version now made 92 whole entire horsepowers and 97 pound-feet of torque. Okay, but seriously though, this quote-unquote alpha power plant was Hyundai's very first self-designed engine, and it did include 3 valves per cylinder, an overhead cam, port fuel injection, and an aluminum head. Perhaps as a response to the base model's unimpressive performance, Hyundai decided to turbocharge the 1.5-liter Alpha engine to create, well, the Scoop Turbo. While the forced induction only boosted power to 115 horsepower and 123 pound-feet of torque, it was reportedly enough to narrowly edge out the Saturn Coupe from 0 to 60, while costing over $1,500 less. The Scoop Turbo also came with a black roof, and turbo lettering that looked like it came straight out of a Microsoft font package. However, the truth was that the competition in the sport compact segment was significantly more dynamically competent than the Scoop was. In a comparison test with the admittedly more expensive Honda Civic Coupe and Nissan 100NX, the road testers at Autocar not so kindly wrote that, quote, "Rarely is the verdict so clear-cut. The Civic Coupe whips the 100NX, which in turn pummels the Hyundai into a not especially honorable last place." The magazine criticized the Scoop's dated interior, unremarkable driving dynamics, and general lack of sophistication. In the end, it was clear that Hyundai's first sport compact while a good value for some, didn't exactly stand out in the hyper-competitive sport compact market, leading to its global discontinuation around 1995. Despite selling in significant numbers, they are nearly impossible to find on today's roads. In 1996, the Scoop's successor was launched. Hyundai correctly figured out that their sporty coupe needed a better name. So, in North America, they called it the Tiburon, which means shark in Spanish. In South Korea, it was called the Tiburon Turbulence, for some added alliteration. And in Europe, it was called the Hyundai Coupe. I guess that's what it was, but anyways, whatever you want to call it, Hyundai's new two-door featured much more modern and distinctive styling than the Scoop. Additionally, it was now based on the Elantra rather than the ancient Excel, and featured slightly more sporting prowess. It was also a hatchback now, which made it significantly more practical. In the North American market, just 2 engines were offered in the vehicle's first generation. The base model featured a 1.8-liter inline-4 with 130 horsepower and 122 pound-feet of torque. However, you could upgrade to a 2-liter with 140 horsepower and 133 pound-feet of torque. Given that the 2 engines were so similar in performance, it wasn't exactly a shock when the 1.8-liter was dropped in North America a year after being introduced. Other markets got a 1.6-liter engine as a more economical option. The dual overhead cam 2-liter did have significantly more power than even the turbocharged Scoop, but it still wasn't exactly fast. For putting the power down, you had a choice of either a 5-speed manual transmission or a 4-speed automatic. According to Wikipedia, the world's most trustworthy source, the RD generation Tiburon featured suspension that was partially developed by Porsche. Wow. But the reality was that it was still no sports car. It was based on an economy car, and though its driving dynamics were better than the Scoop's, it definitely wasn't at the top of its class. In the end, like its predecessor, the RD Tiburon was bought for its styling and low price, not the way that it drove. After a few years, Hyundai felt as if it needed to renew interest in the Tiburon with a facelift. Now, before I show you this vehicle, we need to have a talk. You see, Hyundai must have seen that the competing Acura Integra and Toyota Celica featured distinctive front-end designs with 4 round headlights. So they decided that the Tiburon should also have 4 round headlights. And this is what they came up with. Now, I get what they were going for, but the execution is poor. Anyway, unique styling aside, this new Tiburon was almost identical. At least you can now get ABS on the top trim model, though. After 3 long years of the RD2 Tiburon being produced, the model skipped a year, in the US at least, for 2002. The new GK generation of the Tiburon, now called the Tuscany in South Korea, was launched for the 2003 model year. In most markets, the 2-liter i4 remained as the base engine, but for the first time, the model was available with a V6. While the 2.7-liter unit's 172 horsepower and 180 pound-feet of torque don't sound particularly impressive today, it propelled the car from 0 to 60 in 7 seconds when paired with the new 6-speed manual transmission, which wasn't bad for the time. What wasn't impressive was the 105 horsepower 1.6-liter engine that was still offered in Europe. That was barely more economical than the 2-liter. I would have to imagine that it only existed for insurance reasons. Anyway, for the first time since the Scoop, Hyundai also offered a turbocharged coupe. But only if you lived in Greece. The car was updated for 2005 with new lights, interior upgrades, and the removal of the underpowered 1.6-liter engine. This model is known as the GK Phase 2. In 2007, the GK Phase 3 was introduced, with a new front end, revised rear end, and more interior equipment in the higher trim levels. I personally think that this version of the Tiburon is a genuinely nice looking car that still offers good value for budget-conscious enthusiasts. But even in its final generation, the Tiburon still wasn't the best driving car in the world. It was heavier than the Toyota Celica, had less engaging engines than the Acura RSX, and was tuned overall more for comfort than driving dynamics. What it excelled at, as it always had, was being a stylish, moderately fun, practical, and affordable small coupe. Well, apart from that version. Unfortunately, that wasn't enough to keep the car alive by the late 2000s, and it was time for it to be replaced. Now, depending on how you look at it, the Tiburon was actually replaced by 3 different vehicles, at least in the US. Arguably, the most direct replacement was the Genesis Coupe, launched for the 2010 model year. Unlike its predecessor, the Genesis Coupe was considered by most to be an actual sports car. I mean, it was based on a luxury sedan, but we don't talk about that bit. It was rear-wheel drive, still could be had with a 6-speed manual transmission, and offered some serious performance. The 3.8-liter naturally aspirated V6 made 306 horsepower, which was over 120 more than the V6 Tiburon. And the base 2-liter Turbo 4 used a basic design shared with the Mitsubishi Lancer Evolution 10. While 210 horsepower to propel a 3,380-pound car didn't exactly sound amazing, its base price of $22,750, $33,250 today, was enough to appeal to budget-conscious enthusiasts. It got facelifted in 2013, which increased the power of the 2-liter to 274 horsepower and the V6 to 348. It also got modernized styling, improvements to refinement, and a new 8-speed automatic transmission for the quote-unquote grand touring models. While it was, perhaps prematurely, discontinued in 2016, the car remains a strong value proposition for enthusiasts looking for their first rear-wheel drive car, and has a passionate community in the car scene. The least noteworthy car that I personally consider to be sort of a Tiburon replacement is the Hyundai Elantra Coupe. The Tiburon was based on the Elantra, so perhaps Hyundai wanted to appeal to more budget-oriented coupe buyers, who were more focused on fuel economy than performance. However, that compact coupe market segment was rapidly shrinking, and some might say that this vehicle was doomed to fail. I believe that strange marketing and trim decisions were also to blame. For the 2013 model year, it offered the same 1.8-liter 4-cylinder as the Elantra sedan, but it was criticized for lack of performance. For the 2014 model year, they tried to address this by adding the Elantra GT's 170 horsepower 2-liter, but then they got rid of the available manual transmission. Anyway, it was clear that Hyundai and the buying public didn't know who this car was for, and it was discontinued after just 2 model years. It's a bit of a shame because it wasn't a bad car, and I still think it looks good to this day. But now, a decade later, the Elantra Coupe is a rare sight on American roads, and a footnote in Hyundai's history. So that history lesson took way longer than expected, but now I'm actually going to talk about the car in the title. The concept version of the Hyundai Veloster was first shown off at the 2007 Seoul Auto Show. It had body proportions reminiscent of 80s and 90s sport compact cars, such as the Honda CRX and Mazda MX-3, a glass roof intersected by a body-colored strip, and a completely unrealistic space-age interior with a 2000s iPod prominently displayed in the center console. This sporty coupe thing was supposed to be the height of everything that was young and hip, but it wasn't necessarily intended to be fast. Even the concept version only had an uninspiring 2-liter inline 4. However, it did gain a fair amount of attention, and people began to wonder whether this unique vehicle might actually make it to production. One global financial crisis later, and Hyundai actually brought the Veloster to production. And yes, it was still a bit weird. It still had the concept's unique sloping hatchback shape, still offered a glass roof, just without the mohawk, and perhaps most notably, had one door on the driver's side and two on the passenger side. Now, this wasn't the first car to do this. The second generation Saturn SC offered a pickup truck-style suicide door on the driver's side, and the Mini Clubman offered a suicide door on the passenger side. And fans have had asymmetrical door arrangements for years. However, unlike the Saturn and the Clubman, the Veloster's rear door was a full-size unit that opened conventionally. This meant that it was certainly more noticeable than those other cars, but was far more usable for rear access. Impressively, Hyundai also went to the trouble of switching the door arrangement for right-hand drive markets, which must have been difficult to justify to the accountants. I feel like I should also mention that the optional 6-speed dual-clutch transmission was the first of its kind in a Hyundai, but even though it was called the quote-unquote eco shift, it returned worse highway fuel economy than the manual version. Apparently, the name Veloster is a combination of velocity and roadster, but perhaps that isn't the most accurate way to describe this vehicle. First of all, as you've probably already noticed, it just simply isn't a roadster. Secondly, it wasn't capable of traveling at a particularly high velocity. That's because, underneath all of that sporty styling, there was a rather pedestrian economy car. The FS generation Veloster used the same PB platform as the Hyundai Accent, an i20, and it shared the Accent's 1.6-liter engine. While it did use gasoline direct injection, its fairly modest 138 horsepower and 123 pound-feet of torque left a bit to be desired from driving enthusiasts, even with the standard 6-speed manual transmission. Additionally, the car shared the Accent's inexpensive torsion beam rear suspension, which contributed to the somewhat unremarkable driving experience. Further, the majority of the interior was shared with the Elantra and i30, just with a V-shaped center stack. Obviously, they couldn't get the concept's George Jetson interior by the company accountants. However, what the Veloster did accomplish was being a unique, affordable, stylish, and somewhat practical economy car. Perhaps anticipating the complaints about underwhelming performance, Hyundai launched the more powerful Veloster Turbo for the 2013 model year. It used a turbocharged version of the base model's 1.6-liter engine with 201 horsepower and 195 pound-feet of torque, got a slightly quicker steering ratio, sticky optional Pilot Supersport tires, and different styling that debuted Hyundai's new gaping maw. Corporate grille. While most reviewers loved the extra power compared to the base car, some felt as if Hyundai didn't go far enough towards making the Turbo a true hot hatch. Steering was light, the suspension was virtually unchanged from the base car, and it lacked the refinement of the Volkswagen Golf GTI, let alone the driving engagement of the Ford Fiesta ST. However, it was still relatively fun to drive, and the Veloster's attractively low price made it a somewhat appealing vehicle to enthusiasts looking for something a little bit different. As a first effort at a hot hatch, it certainly could have been worse. Unfortunately, as could be expected with the first model year of a highly stressed small turbocharged engine with direct injection, 2013 and other early Veloster turbos appear to be unusually prone to engine failure, according to some forum members at least, so take this whole segment with several grains of salt. Many issues relate to pre-detonation and fairly weak pistons and rods. While later years still suffer from similar issues, changes were made by Hyundai to make these engines at least slightly more reliable. 2013 also marked the launch of the first Veloster Special Edition, of which there would be many. The Veloster Remix. Yes, that's how it's spelled. was mechanically identical to a base naturally aspirated Veloster, but it had a body kit, graphics, and different wheels. Yeah. Anyway, while it didn't really have any substantive advantage over the normal car, Hyundai's marketing team described it as, quote, the ultimate lifestyle coupe. Sure. Anyway, in 2014, a Veloster with actual substantive changes was launched. Good job, Hyundai. The Turbo R-Spec was billed as the enthusiast model, as it had stiffer springs, slightly heavier steering, and was only available with a 6-speed manual with a B&M Racing short throw kit. It also did without luxuries, such as push-button start, heated seats, and an auto-down driver's window. Not sure how much money that saved, but sure. Oh, and drivers alongside you didn't get to know that you were turning because there weren't any side indicators. Anyway, all of these changes resulted in a less expensive, more focused vehicle. There was also another special edition called the Reflex. Yes, that's really how it's spelled. Additionally, all Velosters, in the US at least, got rear-view cameras, and turbo models got brake-actuated, quote-unquote, torque vectoring, in an attempt to compensate for not including a limited slip differential. For the 2016 model year, the 6-speed dual-clutch transmission in the turbo models was replaced by a 7-speed. Some changes were made to the turbo hood and grille, and a new trim was introduced. The Rally Edition was essentially an R-Spec, but with lighter raised wheels, sportier suspension, and a unique matte blue paint. The next year, the Value Edition was introduced, which added some options that were previously turbo-specific to the naturally aspirated car. But other than that, there wasn't much to write home about. By this point, the Veloster's novelty was beginning to wear off, and parts of the car were beginning to look dated. While I've focused on the United States market for this video, look, this video is already way too long, the vehicle was also sold in a variety of different markets at launch. However, by the end of the first generation, the Veloster had already been discontinued in the UK, most European markets, and Brazil. In that country, the car was originally promised and advertised as having the GDI 1.6-liter engine and a ton of standard equipment. However, it actually had a multi-port injection engine that had less power, and the car had significantly less standard equipment. This resulted in lawsuits and an investigation by the country's public prosecutor, and tons of unhappy customers who had pre-ordered the car. Anyway, all of that didn't stop Hyundai from developing a second-generation Veloster for the few markets in which it was still sold. The JS Veloster was launched in 2018 for the 2019 model year in some markets, and had a wide variety of notable changes. Firstly, it switched from the Accent/i20 platform to the slightly larger Elantra GT/i30 platform. This is important because it meant that the Veloster now had fully independent multi-link rear suspension, addressing a major complaint from the first-generation car. Additionally, for the US market, the base model switched from the Accent's 1.6-liter engine to the Elantra sedan's 2-liter multi-port injection 4-cylinder. Even without direct injection, it still made significantly more power, 147 horsepower and 132 pound-feet of torque, and finally gave the base model adequate performance. Even still, reviewers criticized the engine's uninspiring sound and poor fuel economy when compared to rivals. The base model in the US, now called the Veloster 2.0, could be had with either a 6-speed manual or a conventional torque converter 6-speed automatic, ditching the first-gen 6-speed DCT. Other markets, such as South Korea, got a Kappa 2 1.4-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine in base versions, which produced about 140 horsepower and 178 pound-feet of torque. While still retaining the car's quirky asymmetrical door design and sloping roofline, the car ditched the first generation's 2-piece glass rear hatch for a more conventional design. This, combined with other efficient changes to the new model, means that the JS Veloster has 4 more cubic feet of cargo space than its predecessor, without meaningfully changing the vehicle's dimensions. In fact, it has the exact same wheelbase and is nearly the same length, bucking the auto industry trend of making each new generation significantly larger than the last. In fact, according to Car and Driver, the second-gen Turbo R-Spec weighs 39 pounds less than the lightest first-gen Veloster. When the car launched in the US, it was available in 5 different trim levels. The 2.0, the only way to get a manual and a Veloster, 2.0 Premium, which included nicer wheels, an extended power glass moonroof, blind spot monitoring, heated partial leatherette seats, navigation, and more. The Turbo R-Spec, which included the carryover 1.6-liter Turbo 4, upgraded suspension, turbo-specific exterior trim, LED headlights and taillights, a short-throw 6-speed manual, but did without some of the 2.0 Premium's luxury and safety features. Turbo, which had more equipment than the R-Spec, but could only be had with a 7-speed dual-clutch auto, and finally the Turbo Ultimate, which could be had in either manual or DCT, with a moonroof, heated leather seats, adaptive cruise control, all the safety features, and a wireless phone charger, which I'm sure was very, very good at making your phone really hot. With a price starting at $18,500 in 2019, which is $22,726 today, the Veloster still offered a strong value proposition for buyers. Most reviewers agreed that the new Veloster Turbo had significantly improved driving dynamics when compared with the old model. The new rear suspension design, the use of aluminum components, more responsive steering, and stiffer chassis made the car handle more confidently. While most reviewers noted that it still didn't quite match the driving experience of rivals such as the Honda Civic Si and Volkswagen Golf GTI, the Veloster cost significantly less than those cars, and while it may not have been best in class, the fundamentals were there for a great enthusiast vehicle. Overseas, the Hyundai i30N sent shockwaves through the European hot hatch market when it launched in 2018. On the surface, it didn't bring anything particularly unique to the table. It had a 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine that made around 270 horsepower in performance guise, front-wheel drive, and a 6-speed manual. At the time, there were plenty of hot hatches in that league. However, many were surprised by how complete of a package the car seemed to be, considering it was the company's first real effort at making a high-performance hot hatch. Its chassis tuning, dramatic engine, and clever differential turned the humdrum i30 into, arguably, a real driver's car at a relatively affordable price. It seemed like Hyundai's decision to hire the former head of BMW's M division, Albert Biermann, as the head of their N division was paying off. While the i30N was never actually sold in the United States or Canada, we did get one heck of a consolation prize, the Veloster N. Mechanically similar to the i30N, but a little bit lighter and with one less door, it seemed to finally have the performance to back up the Veloster's design. The base version made do with just 250 horsepower, 18-inch wheels, and no limited slip differential, but at a very appealing price of just under $28,000, or just over $34,000 today. The Performance Pack, which cost around $2,500, included an electronic limited slip differential, 275 horsepower and 260 pound-feet of torque, electronically controlled adaptive dampers, 19-inch wheels, and Pirelli P0 tires specifically developed for the car. According to Car and Driver, it could get from 0 to 60 in just 5.2 seconds and could generate up to 0.97 G on a skid pad. It also had an adaptive exhaust that was capable of generating a ridiculous amount of pops and bangs. Take a listen. While most reviewers said that the driving dynamics couldn't quite match that of the class leader Honda Civic Type R, that car cost around $5,000 more than the Performance Pack Veloster N, and also looked like it was modified by a 12-year-old who was given an unlimited budget at AutoZone. Considering the price, the Veloster N was a very good modern hot hatch, and quickly developed a significant following. Unfortunately, despite the fact that the second-generation Veloster was a markedly improved vehicle than the original, it existed in a very niche, shrinking market segment. Arguably, the Veloster Turbo's closest competitor, the Honda Civic Si Coupe, ended production in 2020, along with the rest of the Civic Coupe line, marking the end of the mainstream front-wheel drive coupe in North America. Additionally, sales of compact hatchbacks in general were rapidly declining in North America. In the late 2010s and early 2020s, the standard VW Golf, Chevy Cruze, Ford Focus, and perhaps most notably, the Hyundai Elantra GT, the US version of the i30, were all discontinued due to slowing sales. This left the Veloster, a car that was far more niche than any of those vehicles, in a bit of a tough spot. While sales in the US had picked up little in 2019 for the redesign, it quickly dropped off to its lowest level ever in 2020. I'm sure there could be no other reason why sales might have been low in the year 2020. But anyway, in 2021, just 1,942 Velosters were sold in America, and there was no 2022 model year. The Veloster was officially dead. Except it actually wasn't, because while 2021 was the final model year for the base and turbo models, the Veloster N actually continued to be sold. In fact, they even added the option of an 8-speed wet dual-clutch transmission, which improved acceleration and should have, in theory, widened the appeal of the previously manual-only N. And it seemed like it did work to a degree, but really, it was too little too late, and no version of the Veloster would return for 2023. The Veloster itself had no direct replacement, but the Veloster N was effectively replaced by two vehicles, the Elantra N sedan and the Kona N, which was a high-performance crossover. Because of course it was. Oh wait, hold on, someone's telling me that the Kona N has already been discontinued because literally nobody bought them. Oh, okay, maybe the world isn't doomed, after all. Some of the Veloster N's spirit lives on in the Elantra N. While it is a bit heavier and apparently doesn't have quite the same magic as the Veloster, it's still a performance bargain among the dwindling number of sport compact cars and hot hatches. It's also one of the few cars you can still buy in North America with a manual transmission, so that's something to celebrate. They even fixed the gaping black hole of a front end for the 2024 model year.
Wow!
Just don't have the exhaust in N mode in front of a California police officer, as that tends to end badly for people. The Veloster Turbo's engine lives on and has been used everywhere from the Hyundai Sonata to the Kia Sportage, but today its most interesting applications are in the Hyundai Elantra N line and Kia Forte GT. These compact sedans add some visual flair and a bit more performance than their base versions at an attractive price. I honestly think that the Elantra N line looks better than the actual Elantra N, but maybe that's just me. The Kia version even offers a manual transmission, at least until it's replaced by the K4 GT line, that is. Now, you might be wondering why I've made a far too long video about a car whose most well-known property is its lack of a door, but I have a bit of a personal connection to the Veloster. That's because I actually drive a 2019 Turbo R-Spec. It had 3 previous owners in just 3 years, faded clear coat on the spoiler somehow, and these Amazon vinyl graphics that I actually grew to like, but I still love it. Is it objectively the best driving car ever? No. But if I find myself on a back road, rowing through the gears, listening to the subtle turbo sounds and exhaust burbles, and throwing it into some corners can still be a ton of fun. Will it be unreliable after about 100,000 miles? Probably, but I prefer not to think about that. That's one hell of a drug, huh? In the greater history of the automobile, the Hyundai Veloster really doesn't seem very important at first glance. It was just an accent that was trying very hard to seem weird just for the sake of it. But it, along with the Genesis Coupe, also represents how Hyundai became respected among some car enthusiasts, a statement that would have seemed ridiculous 20 years ago. Sure, the Scoop and the Tiburon offered a great value for a somewhat sporty car, but they never really lived up to their full potential. The original Veloster Turbo, even with all of its shortcomings, paved the way for the Veloster N, a genuinely impressive hot hatch that now has a whole host of dedicated fans. And while it couldn't survive the crossover domination of today's car market, talented engineers have established Hyundai's N division as capable of making seriously impressive vehicles. The Elantra N still offers a fun driver's car at a reasonable price, and the new Ioniq 5N simulated ICE engine, however gimmicky it may be, shows a dedication to an engaging driving experience. It's a 5,000-pound electric crossover, and it will never be able to fully recreate the Veloster N, but hey, at least they're trying. Thank you so much for watching this video. I know it was a long one, by my standards anyway, and that I haven't really posted anything in, like, forever. So I really appreciate you sticking around. I've got a ton of ideas for videos in the back of my head, but they take a lot of time that I don't really have these days. But either way, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye!